All right, it is 6:02 and we are going to call to order the Tuesday, March 9th, Ross Valley School District Board of Trustees regular meeting. And our first order of agenda is to go into closed session. Were there any public comments, Marcy, on closed session?
There are not.
Okay, so we will recess into closed session for 3 items. The first is conference with real property negotiators regarding Deer Park. The second is a conference with legal counsel regarding anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation pursuant to paragraph 2 or 3 of subdivision D of Government Code section 54956.9, special education program dispute, 3 cases with 3 different student numbers. They're posted on the agenda. And conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation pursuant to paragraph 2 of subdivision D of section 54956.91 or 54956.91 case. And now we can adjourn into closed session and then we'll be back when we're done. All right. Well, we are welcome back from closed session for the Tuesday, March 9th, Ross Valley School District Board of Trustees regular meeting, and are going to continue on with the rest of our regular meeting. As we do with every meeting, we start with the Pledge of Allegiance, but before we go ahead with the Pledge of Allegiance, I want to say Feliz Mes de Historia de la Mujer. So happy Women's History Month to everybody. It's March. And before we say our Pledge of Allegiance, I just wanted to share a little bit about Women's History Month, which I didn't know, about it being in March. It started, Women's History Month started with the International Women's Day, was in March in 1911. Then in March of 1913 was the first major march by suffragists in Washington, D.C. It moved on in 1917, also in March, with the National Women's Party was formed, again in March. And then actually California played a huge role in moving forward with Women's History Month, because in 1970, in the early and mid 1970s, after Title IX was adopted, California had a major role in that. And then the Equal Rights Amendment was passed by the Senate in March as well. And that was in 1972. So that is why we celebrate Women's History Month in March. So happy Women's History Month to everybody. Just a little bit of information. I know there's quite a bit of information, and that our principals and our teachers are helping all of our girls and boys and all of our schools with all of that understanding as well. So happy Women's History Month to everybody. And on that note, we will do our Pledge of Allegiance. So for those of you who would like to join in, let's go ahead and say it. Ready? Go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and adopt the agenda and the time allocations on the agenda. If anybody would like to make a motion for that.
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, we have Ryan motion, Wesley second. We'll go with a vote on that. Ryan? Ryan, you have to say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Wesley?
Aye.
Marie?
Aye.
Shelley? Aye. And Rachel?
Aye.
All right, so we have adopted the agenda. And we'll move now on to item D, which is communications and public comment. Marcy, do we have any public comment not on the agenda?
We do have one item on the agenda, an item on the agenda from
An item on the agenda. Okay, so that's posted then in our communication section in the agenda. So hopefully everybody's had a chance to go ahead and read that. And are there any board announcements? Any announcements from the board as we move on? Nope. Okay. We'll have another at the very end for any committees or anything, but that's just general announcements. And I guess the correspondence and communication, Marcy, is what you were mentioning, that we've got one in that.
Yes, so sorry. We do not have any public comments
Got it.
on any items on the agenda. I was ahead of myself to correspondence. Yes,
Okay.
we have one.
That one item was in correspondence. Okay.
Yes.
And then we've got communication regarding the Yes Foundation report and update.
We're very happy tonight to have Chelsea Donovan, the Executive Director for the Yes Foundation, joining us this evening. And while Chelsea is giving the update for Yes, I will stop sharing my screen, as this is a presentation part of our communication. All right, Chelsea, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Nice to see you all on this finally rainy night, which is really nice to hear. Yeah, so a little bit of an update. We had a board meeting last night. It was actually nice to have Board of Trustee Rachel Litwack with us yesterday for the first time. So thanks for coming. It was great. We're moving right along. So just some numbers of where we're at right now. We had just kicked off our participation campaign March 1st. And right now we're about at 38% participation rate. Believe it or not, that is not too different from where it typically is, sadly, last year and years previous. However, our number, of course, is significantly down compared to years previous. We're a little over $500,000 right now. Our goal is to hit $820,000. That was a 20% budget reduction. We have a ways to go, but I'm fairly optimistic. So this participation challenge typically happens in May, and we've decided strategically to have it this month with an incentive, which is an electric Yuba cargo bike from Mike's Bike. It's a bike that's a little under $4,000. Electric bikes are all the rage right now. I know other foundations in Marin have had really good luck with this. So we've got a lot of messaging, a lot of targeted messaging going out over the next month. And again, we know that, of course, right before tax season, this is a time where parents really like to donate as well. So we're really hoping to get close to our goal by the end of this month. The other reason why we plan this way is depending where we are at the end of this month, we've got 2 full months to really push if we're in the red and if we're far away from where we should be. Our messaging is always this year, invest today to ensure our programs for tomorrow. I think a lot of families have a hard time investing when we don't have our typical programs. However, it really is just solidifying this, culture of giving, and how if we reach this number, our programs will not be impacted due to financial shortfall. So that's our messaging. We resurrected these wooden thermometers that are in all the schools right now, just to really get out in front of people and families. What else was going to say? One other thing that is interesting to know is, as you probably all know, we attend these monthly schools rule meetings, which are, all of the Marin educational nonprofits in the area. And it's really nice to kind of get the pulse of what everybody is doing in the area. And it's quite a mix. Quite a few, I would say about half the nonprofits are in our position, where they're struggling to get there, and they're trying to strategize and figure out their messaging for this year. And I wouldn't say half, but about a third is doing well beyond what they've done in the past. Their communities have really rallied. And I think families, this is a way where they feel like they can help. So we're sharing strategies and seeing what each other's doing and trying to help each other out. So it's nice to really have those monthly meetings. In addition to that, we have monthly meetings. Kafir, our treasurer, and I have monthly meetings with Marcy and Chris, which is really nice. Just a financial pulse, just to see where we're at, to make sure everything's, nothing is going to be a shock and that we're all on the same page. So that's been really nice to have, and to also get on the same page with deadlines and timelines and forecasting. So that's been really nice to do. what else am I going to say here? We recently received a PPP loan, very small, because as you probably all know, we have a very small fraction of our payroll is on W-2. They're all mostly on 1099s, but we did get about a $6,800 PPP loan. And our intention is to use that for their only W-2 employee, Laura Langston, our administrator, for the next 24 months. We'll be able to pay her out from that loan. So that's helpful to get that. And then lastly, just a little overview of our events. Obviously, we're an event heavy organization, and that's not the way it worked this year, but just a few that we did, that the intent was really to kind of drill through the message, drill down of what we do, why these programs are important, and creating connections with our families and these programs and the teachers that offer them. So for example, we've had music sing-alongs. The music department has done a phenomenal job, boosting morale with these amazing sing-alongs from Halloween to winter. And so that's been wonderful. We recently had virtual art night. Everybody is zoomed out, I know, but we had 3 nights, all 4 grade schools were involved, and we had over 30 families. And I think, again, that was a bit of a morale booster for those who could make it. The event we had, it wasn't a big moneymaker, but I think people were so happy with this event. And some of you may have made it. I can't recall who was on the list, but we had this new event that our board member Kelly Miller brought up, and I think it was pretty great success. It's called Artists Among Us, and it was a panel of 6 professional artists, most of them parents in the Ross Valley district, talking about the connection between our education and how they got to where they are. We had a professional ballerina, we had a filmmaker, we had a sound designer, we had a political cartoonist, we had a music producer. I know I'm missing somebody. We really wanted some writers, but the nice thing is this could become a series. When the teachers aren't too tapped, it might actually be next fall, because they're obviously very overloaded right now. We're hoping to do a panel with the teachers, and something that it would be a suggested donation, and we would always have that video. And again, just a way for the families to really connect with and get to know these teachers and get invested in arts education. So that was a nice event that came up from a board member that we're definitely going to continue throughout the years. And I think that's all I have for my update.
Thank you. Appreciate your being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chelsea. Does anybody have any questions for Chelsea on this item? I'm not seeing anyone. All right. Really appreciate you taking the time to come and give us that update. Let everybody know what's happening with YES. We welcome you to come back if, at our other board meetings, if there's stuff that you want to let us know about and let the rest of the community know about. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Chelsea.
you. Good night, y'all.
Good night.
Good night.
All right. So now we are, before moving on, a report out from the closed session. And so on the report out from the closed session, we are going to continue that closed session after this meeting. We didn't get around to all of the items on that closed session. So we will be continuing the closed session after this open regular board meeting. We did take action on a few things, however. So there was a unanimous approval for the settlement agreements, and that was for student IDs ending in 47 and the student ID ending in 44 on the agenda. There was no action needed for the student ID ending in 74. So we took action to unanimously approve the settlement agreements for those 2 student IDs. And that is all to report out from closed session on item number D, which means we are moving on to item E for the presentations and the action items. And the first one is our number 15 update on COVID and the school reopening. So Marcy, if you want to take it away on what's happening with our school reopening. I know there's a lot that's happened statewide since we last talked to you.
It certainly has, and we've been very busy since we last had our last presentation on February 9th. Because of the back-to-back board meetings on March 2nd and March 9th, we wanted to be sure, since our next meeting isn't until April 13th, to get as much planning in as possible. And so tonight is our number 15. So happy to have here tonight with us for this presentation, Matt Catanzari, Principal at Whitehill, Eric Sable, Director of Student Services, Julia Wolcott, Director of Curriculum and Instruction, and myself. And this meeting tonight and this presentation just really marks a milestone in the work that we've been doing since our schools closed almost a year ago. March 13th was our last student day in the 1920 school year in person. And from then on, for the remainder of that school year, we went into distance learning only, and then our planning began for the reopening of the 2021 school year. So it's been a long time, and we are so excited and happy to be moving on in our phased return, and happy to give you some updates tonight. And so as we know with the changes, if there's one thing that we're used to with COVID-19 is that there are changes all the time and things get updated. Our guidelines might change, the status, everything that we have related to how the positive case rates are determined and what that means for counties. And once again, we do have an update to our blueprint for a safer economy. I'm so happy to report that Marin County remains in Tier 2 or red status for a third week. We were moved into the red status on February 23rd, and happy to say that we're continuing on in that red status, hopefully continuing with the lower case rates and moving on into hopefully soon into the orange tier or Tier 3 orange. Our California Department of Public Health did provide an update to the blueprint for a safer economy on March 4th. And that is, as you'll all remember, a statewide plan for reducing COVID-19 and keeping California healthy and safe. And this table here on this slide outlines the requirements for case rates in each of the tiers. Has to do with case rates, test positive rates, quartile test positivity rates for each of the tier status. And then as of March 2nd, CDPH's assessment for Marin County. And so with just the adjusted case rate per 100,000 residents in Marin, down to 5.5, overall test positivity rate 1.9%, and the equity quartile, because that was a big part that they added to the state guidance. And monitoring is ensuring that that there's an equity lens related to everything in how we are tackling COVID-19. So those are trending positive for us. And you can see then that with a 5.5 right now, we're kind of smack dab in the middle of Tier 2. We need to get down to no more than 3.9. And we're right there on that border of the 2% overall positivity rate. And Marin County, happy to report, is well within the need for even Tier 4 related to the equity quartile. So we're doing a great job in Marin County with our equity work on that track. And let's see, in order for a county to advance to a less restrictive tier, it must have been in the current tier for a minimum of 3 weeks. And here we are in our current tier for 3 weeks. And we need to meet the criteria for the next less restrictive tier, which would be Tier 3 or orange, for all 3 measures for the prior 2 consecutive weeks in order to progress to the next tier. So as we're working to stay in our current tier, we'll always have our eyes and sights set on getting into a less restrictive tier and monitoring everything related to that. And this link here for a blueprint for a safer economy dashboard is live. And so if anyone goes to the PowerPoint on our the board docs, our agenda tonight, that link will be live there. And so any questions on the blueprint? All righty, next slide then. And Marin County, as we do move into the different tiers and the levels, Our colors change. So last time on February 9th, when we did our board update, this dashboard for Marin was purple. And now because we're in the red, it is moved to the red or the tier 2 status. And good news to report is since the last update to you all, there's been no change in suspected in-school transmissions. So that rate there still of suspected in-school transmission is at 11 and countywide. And that's breaks down to between student to student is 6 suspected in-school transmissions, adult to adult 3, adult to student 2, and student to adult 0. And so that's great that we're holding steady and have not seen any increased cases within our schools. And of course, we would expect that just because Marin County has been doing well and continues to do better with the case rates. So that's great that we're holding steady there. So we're not seeing any increased rates. And then in Marin County, there's an overall student percentage of 72% of students attending school in person. And in Ross Valley, we have approximately currently right now in our current hybrid 3.2 phase 3.2 is 70% of our students are currently attending in person. And off to the right is our RVSD dashboard. The link up at the top is live. It sits on our district website and it gets updated. And I'm happy to report that we haven't had to update our dashboard since February 10th. So we're right along in line with what we're seeing in the county is no changes. And in our district, we've had no changes since the February 10th update. And in our district, we have only one suspected in-school transmission, and that was would have been student to student. So we don't have any adult to adult or adult to student or student to adult transmissions. So that's good news for us as well.
All right, so this is a familiar slide for all of you and showing our phased return to in-person instruction. And for the last couple of board meetings, we've begun our slide at phase 3 because we're well into our pathway of return. And right now, currently in phase 3.2, having some students attending in-person instruction 4 days a week, those who have a demonstrated need. We've been combining small cohorts at some of our sites where we're able to do that. And we even have some classes who have decided to return full-time kind of ahead of our phase 4 plan, which takes us to phase 4. We did announce to our parent community that beginning April 12th, we will begin our phase 4 of instruction, which means that students at the elementary level through 5th grade really will be attending school 5 days a week with a early dismissal, meaning before 3 o'clock and no earlier than 1 o'clock. And our 6th through 8th grade, Matt is going to be explaining a little bit more about this later, but they will be attending at a minimum 75% of the time. And we're excited to be moving forward on this path and looking forward to that phase 5, which we anticipate will be the case when we return in the fall or in August, really, it's still summer, where we will have 5 days a week of in-person instruction at a regular pre-pandemic school day length of day. All right.
All righty, and in our phase 4, we are so very excited to be beginning that for our TK through 6th graders on April 12th. And for our 7th and 8th graders, they're actually going to start a little bit sooner on March 29th. That's the intended start dates for both of those. And so, as I said at the top of the meeting, we are coming up on our 1-year anniversary of COVID-19 affecting all of our schools, and with shutting down beginning on March 16th, 2020. And we've been planning for this phase 4, getting all of our students back onto campus. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do that as the school year started, as Marin County we needed to start off in distance learning still. But we've been working for about 9 months in getting to this phase of being able to reopen our schools. And it's a very exciting time. We are so excited to be able to have coming up more students on our campuses, and where our classrooms at the elementary level have had to have been split in half in order to maintain the 6 feet distancing. And we've had our A and B cohorts. We are very much looking forward to being able to combine those and have all of the students in a classroom back on the campus. So it's a big time for celebration and also a time for appreciation for everything that all of our employees, our teachers, our faculty, and our staff have done to get us to this phase, as well as our families. This has been also a heavy lift, a huge impact for our families. And so we are just super appreciative that this spring, right after spring break, we'll be able to begin phase 4. So very excited to be able to announce that. And all along in our planning, we have followed the data and the research. And as this pandemic has worn on, more and more data is known and has been revealed. And we know that our schools are safe. With all of the positive cases in Marin, as mentioned earlier, only 11 have been attributed to any school-based transmissions. In RVSD, as you saw on the previous slide with the district dashboard, of the 34 total exposures and positive cases, only 1 is suspected to have occurred on a campus. That means that all the other 33 were community-based. And that is also, like all of Marin County schools, is the majority of the transmissions in Marin had been out in the community, not in our schools. And this goes to show that all of our health and safety protocols, our daily check-ins and monitoring, hand washing, sanitizing, distancing, face coverings, cleaning, disinfecting, they're all working. And we know that our students' academic growth and social emotional well-being are best supported when they are on campus for school. Distance learning has been a necessary part of our phased return from the beginning back in March of 2020 and this fall when our schools were closed to in-person instruction. And we're very proud of and thankful again for our teachers, staff, and faculty, parents, and our students for being able to ride through this with us, to be patient, to be agile, flexible, adaptable, and creative as we get into our next phase. And we're thrilled that once again, Marin was able to get the majority of the folks in Marin with the older population, our healthcare providers vaccinated so that educators could be prioritized, and that Marin Health and Human Services and MCOE worked together to schedule 2 super pod Saturdays, as they're called, and to ensure that all 4,000 Marin educators are able to receive the vaccine. I volunteered at the vaccination super pod this last weekend, and we administered over 2,000 doses, 2,049 to be exact, were administered this last Saturday. And I loved being able to see all of the educators. Some I knew, of course, from our own school district, from other school districts, and other private and schools in Marin, who were able to come through that line. And you could see, even with masks on, the sheer excitement, thrill, exhilaration, and just the feeling of calm and thankfulness for finally being able to get the vaccine. And the signs of relief, it was just palpable on so many faces. It was a very exciting day. Long. Was there about maybe 11 hours total that day on my feet, but it was a great day, so well worth it. And by the implementation of our phase 4, all RVSD employees will have been able to have been vaccinated. Vaccine effectiveness is estimated to be 51% within 2 weeks after the first dose and 92% within 2 weeks after the second dose. And the majority of our employees were able to be vaccinated before last Saturday, March 6th. And so for them, when they get their second dose, that'll come up well before our April 12th return. And the next date of the vaccination event for educators is this Saturday, March 13th. And so all adults in our schools will have been able to, those who will get vaccinated are able to be fully vaccinated no later than April 10th, because that second date for The folks who would get vaccinated this Saturday is April 3rd. So that's their second vaccination date. And it's just interesting to note that this last Saturday was the single largest vaccination event in Marin County history since September 23rd to 1963, which was the KO Polio Day. So very exciting times, and very happy to see that all of our Ross Valley educators included amongst those who will be vaccinated by the time we do start our phase 4. So we know, looking at the data, following the data and our protocols, that schools are a safe place, and we're ready to go.
Great job, Marcy. Great job. And good, thanks for the 11 hours on your feet. That's a lot of work. And I'm sure it felt good for all the educators to just kind of have a big appreciation for each other, and knowing they've made it this far, and the energy was exciting to see. And thanks for putting in that time, man. That's a lot of hours. I appreciate your effort very much.
Thank you, Ryan. And in preparation for the beginning of phase 4, some of our classrooms have begun having all their students back in person. And so these pictures are of one of our classes out on the yard and in their classroom on their first day back today with their entire class. And we have a total of 6 elementary classes that will have begun the full return prior to April 12th. And this is good practice so that we know, like the retaping, the organizing the classrooms, as well as to ensure all of our protocols can be revised if needed, and our sites are prepared for when all students begin in person. So as part of the planning is the HVAC system. You can see of course, in the upper picture, they're outside, but it's great. These are kindergartners, and to be able to see that even the group on the ground talking together, they are maintaining their distance, and they're getting their wiggles out by being able to get outside. And then in our classroom picture here, these are sliders in this classroom, and they're fully open, as well as the door. There's a door at the back side of the classroom as well as the front side. And there's also sliders at the front side of this classroom too. So as you can see, there are some students with their hoodies, with their beanies, and parkas, just keeping warm, as today was a relatively cold day with the rain. But it's exciting to see, and it's great that we've had some of these classes be able to begin so that we can ensure that this next phase goes off without a hitch, and that our case rates and our exposures do not increase. We'll stick with our total of 34 potential or exposures and or positive cases, but only 1 suspected in school. And that's where we're going to stay. That's it for the remainder of the year. We know we're positive of that. Well, we can hope to be. And so we think with all of our protocols and all the planning that we've done, that we'll be able to continue on well through the end of the year. All right, and Eric, you're up.
Okay, thank you. Eric Sable, Director of Student Services. This is actually another image from Brookside Elementary. Miss Molyneux leading a couple of her preschool kiddos to school a little bit earlier this year. One thing that has been incredibly beneficial about us extending the school day following our February break is that it's given our special education additional service providers more time to work with students while they're at school. Because we are in what is considered to be emergency circumstances with the pandemic, the restrictions on gathering, the restrictions on related to social distancing, services like speech, like occupational therapy, like class, all of those have been radically shifted. For example, prior, we couldn't have groups coming into a group speech session or group OT session from different cohorts because of the COVID guidelines. And also too, because of the fact that we weren't at school in person for quite as long, though of course our service providers were also and continue to do some of their work virtually. But long story short is that now with the kiddos on campus for more time, in our SDC classrooms at Brookside Elementary, for example, go until 2 p.m. So that is really exciting because it's helping those service providers have more time and opportunity for speech services, for occupational therapy, whether it's individual, whether it's group. You walk around the campus, you see the staff out and about outside doing group sessions where we know that those are the safest conditions. And of course, able to push in and work with the teachers in their classrooms as appropriate. So now this doesn't mean that we have been able to return to normal, where we're able to provide all of the services in the minute. Well, we do provide all the services, but all of the exact minutes that are in a student's IEP, again, because of the emergency circumstances and because of those restrictions. But we're getting closer to that normalcy. So this is really exciting to see. It's obviously great for our students, for our families, and it's also really exciting for our staff. And I'm grateful for all of the educators in Ross Valley School District, across Marin County, across the state and nation. But I really do tip my hat to our special education team who, again, at the Brookside campus and at White Hill, had students back in person for 5 days a week starting October 5th, 2020. So we continue to see progress in this, and we know that as we move towards 5 days a week for all students, this reality will just continue to get us closer to that normalcy that we all want.
All right, and Matt. Thank you.
Thank you for having me again for a White Hill update. As we mentioned, I'm going to go in chronological order, starting with March 29th. And March 29th is when we plan on increasing our in-person time for our 7th and 8th graders. And the reason that March 29th is the date for that increase is that is the beginning of Q4. So it is hard to believe that we are almost 3/4 through the year, but we have made it this far. And our teachers, 7th and 8th grade teachers, felt pretty strongly that if a shift was going to occur, it should occur when that natural break in our schedule happens. So I'm going to talk about the extended schedule for 7th and 8th grade first, and then the idea that we have and how to increase the number of days students come to school. So the image that we have here is our bell schedule that is going to be shared out with all of our families, hopefully this week. And in the Q4, we're still on our 3x3 schedule with period 0 for students that are in the B cohort, and then periods 1, 3, and 5. And if you look at this and you're familiar with our current schedule, you'll notice that nothing changes until the 12:10, the end of the nutrition break at 12:10. So in the morning, the in-person students have 0 period, 1st period, and then 3rd period. The at-home students have 0, 1, and 3, and they're participating in the lesson launch and asynchronous work, depending on what the lesson is that day for the class. Many of our 7th and 8th grade teachers are concurrently teaching throughout. So the students that are home are staying on Zoom for the majority of the class periods at the moment. And again, that's kind of determined by what is being taught that day and what the lesson is. The change starting March 29th in our schedule is after the nutrition break from 11:55 to 12:10 is that we are going to be resuming our advisory class for 25 minutes. And then after advisory, students will finish the day in their 5th period, ending at 2 o'clock. So our dismissal will be at 2 o'clock for our 7th and 8th grade students. Looking forward to having advisory again. I feel like we missed out a little bit with our 7th and 8th graders for our community building. Advisory is also going to be used for office hours, things like that, that we're used to using advisory for. Prior, when we were Zooming the whole time, and also last year when we have our advisory during a normal pre-COVID school time. So that is the bell schedule for 7th and 8th grade starting March 29th. And then as far as getting students to campus more frequently, as Julia mentioned in one of those previous slides, we are looking to have students on campus 75% of the time. Currently, students are on campus 40%. So that is a significant increase, and our teachers are looking forward to it. Our students are going to be looking forward to it. I think parents are going to look forward to it. I'm looking forward to it. So we're excited about that. And the way we're going to make that happen is if you think of our cohort A shows up on right now on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. If you think of our Tuesday schedule when cohort A is there, cohort A will continue to be there on a Tuesday, and we will add half of cohort B to that schedule. On Wednesday, cohort A will be in school, and we'll add the other half of cohort B. So cohort B will flip-flop between Tuesday and Wednesday, and then the same thing will happen with Thursday and Friday, but cohort B will show up on Thursday and Friday. Half of cohort A will show up on Thursday. The other half of cohort A will show up on Friday. And then as far as Mondays are concerned, we are going to be in person on Mondays. That'll be a shift from what our current schedule is. We will be doing something similar where Mondays will rotate between A's and B's. And I know that it is really confusing to listen to. And we are coming up with several different schedules so we can share out with families so they can see exactly what days of the week their student will be on campus and things like that. And then I want to briefly touch on 6th grade and talk a little bit about why we are waiting until April 12th to start 6th grade. As you all remember, our 6th grade schedule is unique from our 7th and 8th. We are not doing a 3x3 schedule for our 6th graders. And with that are some complexities. For one, some of those 6th grade elective teachers, they are all teaching 7th and 8th grade students. So we have to make sure the schedules overlay each other and we figure that out. The other thing that we're really looking at, there's been a huge increase in the request to return to in-person. And our 6th grade students, we've had some consistent cohort C's in 6th grade where they were able to synchronously join class every day for all of their classes. And with the number of students that have requested, families that have requested to come to in-person, that is going to shift. So there's going to be some schedule changes for students. And that is why we need a little bit more time to make that April 12th. That's why we're choosing April 12th to be after spring break, when we're going to start increasing the number of days our 6th graders are on campus. And as soon as that schedule is solidified, I will be sharing that out with all of our 6th grade families. So I'm hoping to have that out by midweek next week at the latest.
All right, any questions for Whitehill?
Question from Marie here, Matt. I paid attention to the AB cohort description that you gave, but it was very hard to follow. Yeah. So can you tell me again, when is that the parents are going to receive a date on that? Is it like mid next week, or can you repeat that? I don't need to know the details right now. I just need to know when is that we will know. You know what I'm saying? Yeah,
we still have some families that haven't responded to the survey.
Oh, got it.
The survey closes tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And so as soon as that survey closes, then we'll know where everyone stands. And I would think by the Wednesday of next week, we will have everyone with a schedule with, they're not going to change cohorts A or B. Those are going to be, if they're currently in cohort A, their students are going to stay in cohort A.
Yeah.
But I will be able to share what B day the cohort A, their group of cohort A should be able to attend. So I would say by the middle of next week, that should be all solidified and ready to roll, and we can share that out.
Okay, thank you. Because as you know, a lot of parents are carpooling, and this just gives me a headache just to figure out what's going to happen with period 0 and a new carpooling arrangement that families need to make.
Right.
Like 1 week notice or something like that would be great. Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you for increasing the number of hours on campus. Whenever they are, we will take them. Thank you.
All right, it's very complicated, but I think, Matt, is it correct to say if you're an A, you're still going to go on Tuesday and Wednesday. If you're B, you're still going Thursday and Friday, but you get to pick up an extra day, either one of the A days or one of the B days, whatever the opposite is.
That's correct. So we'll be adding a few Mondays, and then we'll be adding one of the A or B days, depending on what your cohort is.
Super. Thank you so much.
And as we move into phase 4, we will be continuing our health and safety protocols. So our mask wearing, all persons who attend any of our campuses or our district office for work or school will need to wear masks. And where we are making a change is in the physical distancing. We're maintaining a minimum of 6 feet between staff to staff or adult to adult, and also between the staff or the adults to students. And we will be moving to a minimum, or sorry, no less than 4 feet between students. And we are, again, as I mentioned before, we're following all the data and all of the research that's out there to show the health and safety measures to have in place. And so knowing that, with the CDC, they recommend no less than 3 feet. So anything more than that is a benefit. Our California Department of Public Health, in terms of its guidance for schools, says no less than 4 feet. So that is where we are going. And hand washing, sanitizing will still be in play. And so, now with more kids on the elementary campuses at once, or even at our middle school, it might take a little bit more time to do the hand washing and sanitizing. And then also some of the changes that are coming up is related to quarantines. So up until the CDPH guidelines for schools came out, we were referring to our half class sizes or cohorts. And the state has gone away from that. They define a cohort as targeted supports and intervention services, and what they refer to as a classroom base, a general education classroom, is a stable group. And so based on the data that we have in Marin County related to the dashboard and the number of positives, exposures, case rates, is that what's going to be shifting is, instead of closing one of the stable groups, aka otherwise known as a cohort, we won't be doing that anymore. We'll be really relying on the contact tracing protocols that are in place, so that in the event that there is a positive case, that only those folks, the student who tested positive or had an exposure with a member of the community, then only those folks will be quarantining. And so there won't be the need to close an entire classroom, for example, or a stable group. So that's where the contact tracing that we have been doing, and in coordination with Marin Health and Human Services, that will continue. A little bit more of the onus for the contact tracing is going to be shifting to the school sites, but MHHS will be right there with us as we need to talk, get advice, or that kind of thing as to how to move forward. And we know that, let's see, did I see that? Related to what some of the questions that have come up is related to the distancing and how do you measure that? And even last week on the call with Marin Health and Human Services, we have every Thursday is a call for the public health liaisons, and each of our schools, as I've mentioned before, has a minimum of 2. And as well as we have some here at the district office. We get on these calls every Thursday to get questions answered, to hear the latest around whatever might be the guidelines, the protocols that we need to have in place. And so the recommendation is you measure, either mask to mask or center of chair to center of chair. And so not the edge of the desk, for example, or the workstation, but actually where the human is. And so that's where you measure that distancing, is where the human is. And so we've gone out, a few of us, to each of the schools to just help ensure for the preparations that we're calibrating our measurings and looking at all of our furniture needs in our schools to ensure that as we have more kids back in our classrooms, that we have all of the furniture that we need. And also, just as another precautionary measure, putting up the plexiglass barriers in our schools, so that where we have tables, for example, not individual student desks, there will of course be no less than 4 feet between the students, but also there will be a plexiglass barrier between them as an added measure. And so we'll just keep working on our health and safety measures, and anything that we need to shift, we will be sure to do that before we have any more students on our campuses.
All right. And in the midst of looking at reopening and talking about distancing between students and between staff, we came across this really interesting study, and it's a huge study. If you read the fine print down here at the bottom, it involved, this is in the state of Massachusetts, and it involved 243 districts with 520,129 students and 97,679 staff. So really a massive number of humans. And what the graph shows here, this top graph shows staff case rates at 3 feet of distancing and at 6 feet of distancing. And then the bottom line here are student case rates, again, at 3 feet and 6 feet. And basically, you can see in the title here, the data indicates no substantial difference in case rates for students or staff with 3 feet versus 6 feet of distancing since school reopened. So we hear it a lot, you know, the distancing we hear, and we hear in the guidance and the CDC saying 3 feet, and I found it really interesting to actually see a large study like this showing that indeed there is safety in the 3 to 4 feet of distancing. And again, we will not be going less than 4 feet of distancing between students within the Ross Valley School District, nor will we go fewer than 6 feet from staff to staff or staff to student.
And another area of our planning and related to our health and safety is natural ventilation. On our weekly public health liaison calls, Dr. Santora always reminds us that the virus hates the outdoors, and so that natural air. And this is a slide from last week's call, which was another area to know and to learn about, which is that natural ventilation. So related to the data is that we look at air changes per hour, or ACH. And in hospital standards, the ACH is 6. And what our goal is in our schools is getting down to 5. And it is interesting to note that opening windows in a 30 by 30 foot classroom, just 6 inches achieves 5 or more ACH with clean outdoor air. And more, of course, if windows or doors are also open. So just think about it, just 6 inches, 2 windows in a 30 by 30 classroom, just 2 of the windows gets you down to the 5. And so we are encouraging all of our students to, and our employees as well, to please come dressed for the weather, because whether we're utilizing our outdoor learning environments and or the interior learning environments, those doors, the windows, they're open, and we want them to be to maximize the natural ventilation. We've also, as I've talked about in previous meetings, have set our HVAC systems to maximum airflow capacity to go through the room. We've installed the MERV 13 filters in all of our classrooms. And additionally, we have purchased the air purifiers for every one of our classrooms and offices. And those air purifiers have actual filter that is better than a MERV 13. And so with all of these measures to get the natural ventilation moving throughout all of our classrooms and workspaces, that is also contributing, we believe, to our safe spaces in schools. So we're really happy to report that now there's a little bit more data and information to go along with the why. Why do we do these things in our schools?
All right, so considerations and complexities. In planning for phase 4, there's a lot to think about, and we are working collaboratively with our administrative team and our teaching team and all of our staff to determine the best way to move forward. But lots is going on, as Marcy mentioned. We've been going around measuring classrooms for different distancing configurations and taking a look at our furniture and how to maximize the furniture that we have, how to fit 2 kids at a table while making sure that there's 4 feet of distancing, and the use of the dividers, what are they called, Marcy?
The plexiglass. And not all of them are plexiglass, but they're clear plastic.
Got it.
Yeah.
And getting those in place. So lots to think about there. As Marcy again mentioned, we're super excited that all of our Ross Valley School District educators and employees will have access to 2 doses of the vaccine before the return on April 12th. We are collaborating with our staff. We are working with our Delight leadership team. We met with them last week for a preliminary discussion. I am meeting along with principals with our AMP, our art, music, and physical education teachers this Friday to start talking about what those lessons will look like in phase 4. Parents received a survey, I believe, last Friday. And in a moment, we'll show you our current results of that survey, but we have asked for our parents to commit to either in-person or full virtual learning. And it looks like, I believe we have about 75% of our parents responding right now. And so we thank them. And if they're still waiting to respond, please do so as quickly as you can, because we really need to know what the plan is for every family so that we can move forward with our staffing plan, and particularly determining what support will look like for our full virtual learners. We will be engaging with labor partners in collective bargaining with our Ross Valley Teacher Association. And as always is the case in schools, we'll continue to work on supervision for our students. We may be soliciting parent volunteers to help with that for breaks and recess and that sort of thing.
And one of the other things that we did too is we did have a superintendent's council meeting. Was it now about 2 weeks ago? And it was great because even though it wasn't super well attended by each of our schools, site council, parent club, representatives, those who were in attendance gave great feedback and input that we've been able to use in our planning for phase 4. So it's been very helpful.
And our timeline in terms of how we're going to get there, we've talked about meeting with staff and our teacher leaders and AMP, surveying parents. We're now pretty much in the place as we get the results from the parent survey of determining classroom configurations. Next week, we'll be in negotiations with RVTA. And then we'll be able to finalize our schedule and really start our plan to get everything in place for TK through 6 for April 12th. And as Matt said, 7th and 8th are going to get a jump start on this beginning the week of March 29th. But we have a clear path ahead of us, and we're feeling really great about it and very, very appreciative to all who are working with us to make this happen. And the results to the survey. So for TK through 5th grade, we have about a 75%. So 75% of our students, families have affirmed for their student whether they will be virtual or in person. And right now, we only have 4.7% of those who have responded requesting full virtual learning. We do know, however, that the decision to remain or to enter into full virtual learning is a more difficult decision. So we anticipate that those numbers may go up. in the next couple of days. And a huge thank you to our principals who've made themselves available to all families to just enter into conversation as they make this very important decision for their students, for their children. And 6th through 8th grade, they've got an 84% response rate with about 5.3 of respondents asking for full virtual learning. And until we really know for certain how many virtual learners we will have, it does make it very difficult for us to plan what that learning is going to look like. So we look forward to, we'll probably be, I think principals are reaching out to any of the current families that are in Cohort C, virtual learning, to make sure that they understand what their request will be, what their requested mode of instruction will be.
This is Shelley. Can I ask one quick question? Could you just reiterate again the deadline for this? Because I'm assuming because decisions have to be made on this, which is very different than what's been happening so far, where people could move back and forth between virtual and then back in person and then back to virtual if they needed to, and that this is a real important change for everyone really to know about. And what is the absolute deadline that parents are given that said, you need to, here's the deadline. And what is that again?
This morning at 8 o'clock.
Okay.
So we're in pretty good shape, and that is why. And so what we decided was, you know, with about 25% of the kids, maybe 100 kids that we haven't heard from, those families, then what makes the most sense to us, because we did, when we sent the survey out, we did say that if we don't hear from you, the default will be your current mode of instruction. However, we don't want to make that assumption for anyone who's currently in virtual learning. So there will be a reach out to those families just to reaffirm that that is indeed their choice.
Okay. Thank you very much for that.
Sure.
And White Hill's survey is due tomorrow. I think it closes at 10 o'clock a.m. if I remember right.
And they're in good shape.
Yeah.
84%.
And it's interesting to note too that the percentage, so currently in our current model of hybrid, we have about 30% of our students are in virtual learning. And you can see by these numbers that it'll be a lot fewer students who will remain in virtual learning. But it is really important that we know, and we know it's hard for some families, like what comes first, that chicken or the egg? They want to know, what will it look like for my child? We won't really know that until we know how many kids will be in virtual learning. And so for us to be able to plan and move forward, we really do need those survey results. And so as Julia said, it's been very helpful that the principals have been available to families to answer any and all questions that they have.
Yeah. And what we do know is that it will look different from the way that it has been, because when a teacher has, 20 or 23 students in front of them, it's a lot more difficult to attend to students who are at home. So managing that room, the roomers and zoomers, when you have a much smaller class of in-person, it's still, believe me, tremendously difficult, but it's more manageable than it would be if you've effectively got a full class of kids who need you. And so that's something that we look forward to determining.
Quick other question then. So that's still part of the figuring out process, is whether the full virtuals go to a separate class together or do the concurrent, or is concurrent not going to happen, or is that still part of the process of determining?
I'd say there's maybe 3 or 4 different scenarios that we've been talking about, and we also recognize that it may not be a one size fits all. That's kind of what we've found to be true this year, that we've had to put lots of different puzzles together all at the same time in order to make everything work. So I know it must be frustrating for families not to know exactly what things will look like, but it is a cart before the horse kind of a situation.
And very much appreciate all of that Rubik's cubing that you all have been doing over and over and over. So much work, and thank you.
Absolutely.
One of the things that we've been monitoring this school year is we've had some students leave Ross Valley, and we have paid attention to where are they going? Where did they go? And so here is a listing by each school site. the different locations or types of schooling that the children who have left us have gone to, where we know them. In some cases, we don't know. But we're looking at about total 218 students have left us this year. And for some of those families, a lot of them actually, they've indicated that they need to know from us what will next school year, that they've been able to find other locations like outdoor schools or private schools that are offering all of their students into their classes. And so once we already have stated, and we will continue to plan toward a full return with a pre-COVID type of schedule. And as we get a little further along, we will then start to do some outreach directly to the families who've left us because they will need to re-register. Some already have. I see them in our school mint system, and they've already re-registered. And some, as we can see here, the number who've actually moved out of our schools, that's 33% of our families who did move out of the area. And so here are the numbers here and the percentages of each of those. So 32% did leave us to go to private. 12 of our Ross Valley kids are being homeschooled. 4% have left us to go to various charters. Inter district, going to other school districts, is 10%. Some who've decided not to stay after all in kindergarten, for example, or TK, they've remained in preschool, that's 3%. And as I mentioned, 33% have moved and 5% are unknown, not quite sure where they've gone. But any questions about the students who've left us?
Marie here, not a question, but a comment. I do thank you for putting this table in front of us, specifically as we are going to review and approve the budget interim, because there is definitely a lot of concern and modeling to do as we see enrollment going down. And I look forward to see how many of those students will come back next year, because until the first day of school where they are in the school, until then, I do not believe we will know for sure who is coming back really. There might be some intent, but I think it's fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing with all of us.
You're welcome.
Yeah, very useful.
And one of the things which I'm not sure if we hit that tonight, related to the elementary school schedule, is we're looking at the end of the school day being no earlier than 1 o'clock. And as soon as we have the schedule worked out and the details, we will be letting our families know exactly what the school day is going to look like. And just like with moving into hybrid, the schedule will have some flexibility, like there will be a common amount across all of our schools for the amount of break or recess time, but how a school chooses to organize that amount will be up to them. And so we'll look at having consistent learning blocks and times for each of the schools. And then again, yes, we will be fully open in the 21-22 school year. And as Dr. Willis has let us know, or from a part I pulled out of the IJ on March 2nd, is that he anticipates we'll still have to use face coverings and monitor the variants, but I do see schools coming back full time in the fall. And so we too are planning for that, and we're looking forward to it. In our interim step is getting to phase 4 and being very excited to be able to have all of our students, and not just some of our students, on our campuses. And then even as we plan for next year, just as with looking to come back into or expand and go into phase 4, we do know that some of our families may need to have a virtual learning option next school year. So we will be also asking families to commit for next school year and to let us know what model, so that we can plan for any type of virtual learning that may need to be provided next school year. But we're planning for a full return, and then of course, as needed, a virtual learning option for any of our families. Let's see, anything else? That's right now, we don't know what any guidelines might be in place, but I think Dr. Willis here has given us a good heads up, or at least a little bit of an insight. So we know that at the minimum, face coverings will be at play for next school year as well. All right, and any questions on any of our schools reopening update number 15 tonight?
It's Wesley. I thank you very much for the presentation. I don't have any questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to also just reiterate that I really appreciate the amount of thought and helpful information that you all have put into communicating every time. I know, as I mentioned, it keeps changing and you keep redoing the puzzle. And then not only do you do it and implement it, but then you come and present this information. So thank you so much for putting in the time to make this available to us, to then upload it onto our website so that other parents can see it if they weren't able to listen to this tonight. And thank you so much for all that effort.
You're welcome. And after tonight's board meeting, by the end of the week, Sean will, of course, do what he's done, which is to just take this excerpt for this part of the board meeting tonight, and I'll email it out to all of our staff and families.
Thank you so much for starting to do that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Alrighty, so I'll go ahead and share my screen and we can go back onto our agenda.
All right, so we then are going to be on to the next agenda, which is the recommended approval of a disbursement for Ross Valley Healthy Communities Collaborative. It's for the funds that are held by our district for the Marin Healthy Youth Partnership. We're going to have I believe, going to have a short presentation on this, and then there is a decision that we do need to make.
Yes, thank you. And what we've done here is to put up all the information that we can find has been provided from the MHYP representatives. So really helpful to have Kelsey join us tonight, Kelsey Fernandez, and John Wright, as well as Sophie Taubman. So Sophie is the Youth Advisory Council member to MHYP, John Wright is the board chair, and Kelsey is the project coordinator. So we put the history here, having new trustees join us, as well as some of this goes back, as you can see, back to 2015 and possibly even sooner. So it's been a long time coming, and in terms of when the district first set money aside for what was known back then as the Ross Valley Healthy Community Collaborative, or RVHCC. And really want to thank Kelsey too for putting together a slide presentation tonight, and also for pointing out we had some typos in our presentation. So I fixed those. And so actually it was in 2019 that Ross Valley Healthy Kids Collaborative became the successor agency of Marin Healthy Youth Partnership. And also the link Kelsey pointed out from the December 14, 2017 meeting actually took us to the January 2016 meeting. So that link has been updated. And then I realized as I was doing that in some cases we transposed MHYP with MYPH. So I fixed all of those as well. So thank you. And thank you so much, Kelsey, Sophie, and John for joining us this evening. And wait, oh, there you are, John. You're right next to me. All right. In our bingo squares here. All righty, so Kelsey and John and Sophie, take it away.
Thanks so much, Marcy. Now I am having connectivity issues, so I apologize. I am going to start the presentation and then Sophie's going to take over. Let me just see if I can screen share.
You should be able to.
I can.
Great. Okay.
So I'm going to start that now. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. Okay. So, okay, well, again, I'm Kelsey Fernandez, and I really appreciate you taking the time for us tonight. I'm just going to run through a brief history of how RVHCC became Marin Healthy Youth Partnerships, an overview of the Let's Talk booklet campaign, and a few of our other prevention efforts in Ross Valley. And then Sophie, who is an active member of Marin Healthy Youth Partnerships Youth Advisory Council and a senior at High School 1327, will talk about the importance of peer prevention efforts and the work she has been involved in over the past year. So first, a brief explanation about how RVHCC became MHIP. Simply put, Ross Valley Healthy Community Collaborative merged with Twin Cities Coalition for Healthy Youth. When we did this, we were very aware that we needed to maintain boots on the ground and sector representation of the communities, which we have done. And I personally am one of 3 part-time coalition coordinators. I myself live in San Anselmo, my kids to Brookside, White Hill, and now our freshman and senior at High School 1327. We have retained key individuals for both coalitions who are on the current board of directors. And John Wright were founding board members for Ross Valley Healthy Community Collaborative. So in 2016, the Ross Valley Collaborative started sending out a community of concern booklet, which was a generic but informative guide to alcohol and drugs in the teen years to all incoming freshman families at Drake. The following year, the program expanded to all public high schools in Marin. And while we really liked the idea of the booklet, we wanted something more relevant to our community. So last year, actually it was February of 2020, MHIP decided to create a Marin specific booklet that was customized to include local data and conditions and personal testimonies. We also wanted to offer an online version that wasn't available previously for wider distribution. And this was a collaborative effort with MCOE and HHS, that's Marin County Office of Education, Marin Health and Human Services, and a team of volunteers, including local parents and youth. In addition to that, we wanted to reach beyond the schools, so we created posters for doctors' offices, rec centers, and other areas where teen parents and caregivers pass through. Then last fall, one of our action team members suggested hosting community conversations to take a deeper dive into the content of each chapter and bring the learning to life. So we quickly launched our online discussion series. And so this is the essence of the entire Let's Talk campaign. Based on the success of the Let's Talk booklet and campaign, and also Marin Healthy Youth Partnerships' collective goal to reach younger students and parents, we pitched the idea of a 6th grade booklet to our partners at MCOE and HHS, and they agreed. So we are now in the process of creating an outline of content. Part of that process was a focus group to get input from parents of elementary and middle school children. I just want to touch quickly on a few other prevention efforts over the past year in Ross Valley. We know that environmental prevention is one of the most effective strategies when addressing underage substance use. We look at the community attitudes, beliefs, actions, and systems that have contributed to the consistently high rates of underage substance use among our local youth, with the goal of creating a shift that supports a healthier environment for all. Raising the Bar program was created in San Anselmo by Ross Valley Healthy Community Collaborative members and has been adopted by a number of local youth sports teams who now exclude alcohol from youth sporting event activities and celebrations. MHIP members also work on educating local leaders and residents about policies that protect youth, like the flavored tobacco ban and local regulations on businesses. Do community education for both students and parents. Sophie Taubman, who I'm going to pass it off to now, has been involved in each of these efforts. So I will let her share the work from her perspective.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Sophie Taubman, and I'm a part of the Youth Advisory Council, which is a subgroup of the Marin Healthy Youth Partnership. So I've worked with Kelsey and Marie as well, and I am now a senior at HS 1327. And I have grown up going fully through the Ross Valley School District. I went to Wade Thomas. I have 2 older sisters as well that did the same path. And then I went to White Hill, and now I'm, like I said, at HS 1327. So I've really been through that. I'm really familiar with all of the education that's been given, and I have kept up to date with it through my internship. And so, as Kelsey mentioned, the events that I helped plan was the first day film event, which was specifically designed. It was a screening during quarantine, which was a community event where people were able to watch the movie live together and then ask questions to a group of panelists. And that was a really great film because it really focused on not kind of the upstream cause of why people use alcohol, really focusing on why do people in the first place ever ask, let's start drinking. And so that really hit home with younger parents and people who had kids specifically in middle school, because that's really when kids start to think about substances and start hearing about it, as I'm sure you all know. And same with alcohol, the magic potion. That was another online event, and I spoke as a panelist, and that film specifically focused really on how much the alcohol industry as a whole has gotten just beyond our scope of control. Like it's really just so far beyond anything as a community we can do to stop it, because it's so international, which is why we need to tackle it as a community to make any impact. It really can't be a standalone mission of a single parent to try to keep alcohol out of their kid's life. That's just not going to work, because unfortunately it's become such a massive industry worldwide. There's no way a kid cannot know about substances such as alcohol. Similarly, so really on topic for tonight's discussion, the Let's Talk booklet series, I spoke as one of the Zoom panelists for the one that's for high schoolers right now. And so I got to speak with Jacqueline Davis, who wrote the pamphlet, and really got a greater understanding of where she was coming from. And I absolutely love everything that she wrote. I think it was really, really applicable. So I can speak to, she did a great job on writing the high school one, and I think she'll do just as good of a one on the 6th grade version. And I'm actually have committed to help her read over drafts, give input, and as someone who went through the White Hill system, again, I think I'll be able to really hone in on what needs to be talked about. And I strongly think that this is very much worth the while of creating it, because I know that this is something that parents need to hear. That's all I'm going to say, is that in 6th grade, people going through middle school, it did start to come up. It was a conversation. And the way that she writes it is very clear and concise and helpful. And when speaking on the panel, it was so great to see how many people did show up and wanted to learn more and ask questions. So I think that for high schoolers, which is when parents usually step back a little more too, I think that younger parents are definitely going to be eager to jump on this and get engaged. And I think that it'll be very helpful. So I know that we're running out of time here, so I'll wrap up. But yes, as someone who represents the youth voice, I'm definitely committed to keep doing that. I've spoken at city council meetings trying to not further the development of cannabis shops in San Anselmo, and likewise the flavored tobacco bans, which have, mostly been aimed at youth use, helped ban those in multiple different towns. And just recently I spoke on something that was called the Triple Threat COVID Mental Health and Addiction to Middle Schoolers at a Bay Area wide conference. And again, that was actually just last week, and it really confirmed just how much middle schoolers feel these effects. Like, I think that I think, oh my gosh, 11-year-old to 12-year-olds, they're too young for this. They're not. And it was alarming, but also, very helpful for me to get that reality check. And it kind of refreshed my memory on, wow, people did talk about these things in middle school. I kind of forget because it feels like a high school issue, and it's really just not, unfortunately. So I can't emphasize enough how helpful I think this will all be. And overall, yes, again, I've been working with Raising the Bar and have helped just with different parent letters and such, just to tie it into my experience in the school district. So overall, I'm definitely happy to answer any questions, and I just really support all of the work that I've gotten to help do.
All right, thank you all for being here. And John, as you all might know, a former trustee in the Ross Valley School District. So great having you back, John. Thank you.
Thanks.
And so as we have outlined in our presentation tonight here in the background is the estimated total cost of the 6th grade pamphlet is well over $24,000, and the amount that Ross Valley has committed and holds in before you tonight, trustees, action to take to release the amount of $10,596.66 over to MHYP to be able to create and distribute the 6th grade booklet. Any questions for any of our guests this evening?
I don't have any questions. I just really appreciate you all coming and giving us an update on everything that's going on, besides just the pamphlet, but to just get an kind of a little history of all of that is really helpful, especially for us new trustees. I know that we've had various paying attention to it as parents and stuff in the district, but we just want to thank you for taking the time to come and talk to us. I did have one question about how this is connected to the wellness centers at the high school, and then also maybe to the peer resource program at the high school. Has there been any connection with that? That was my one question.
I can talk about a little bit about the history. I just got a little message that my internet is unstable, so I apologize. And then I'll let Sophie jump in. But a couple years ago, we did collaborate with Wellness on the We Educate program. And that's something where we brought in educators. They worked with peer resources, then peer resources created a poster campaign and presentations to them. And they even had a full day where they had games and all of these different types of activities to educate the students. And then we also have done Escape the Vape, which is another peer-to-peer program that was done through Wellness. And I don't know, Sophie, do you have anything to add to those?
Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. Other than that, I do think that it's a little bit unbalanced at different schools. Like I know Redwood has a much more developed 2P program, which is the tobacco prevention program. And I think HS 1327 and TAM could both really benefit from having that because nicotine's gotten so common. And peer resource, I would say again, it really varies per school because I have a friend that's on peer resource at Redwood, and I think they do work with kids a little more directly on mental illness type of things. And versus at HS 1327, it's a little bit more, it feels a little more community and like community trust focused, and like trusting your peers, kind of like, you know, a supportive environment, but I wouldn't say it's as focused and all has different norms. So I think that's definitely something that could be worked on, is more commonality. So every kid that goes to whatever high school gets a similar experience. But yes, their short answer is they're connected, but I would just say in varying different ways.
Please don't take my lack of questions as a signal that I don't think this is important work. I just really appreciate the presentation, and I don't have any questions. But thank you very much for coming and for raising awareness.
All right. If there aren't any questions, we do have a decision before us, which is essentially to release the funds that we've been holding in escrow for a while in support of this work and this booklet so that it can, all the great work that's being put in can come into our junior high. And Sophie, I appreciate you talking about how like starting early when the students are really starting to just have those questions and think about it. And so that's where it does come into the Ross Valley School District. So we do have that before us. if anyone has any questions on that. Yeah, Marie?
No, I'm ready to move the motion if there is no more questions. So I move the motion to approve the disbursement of Rose Valley Healthy Community Collaborative funds held by Rose Valley School District to the Marin Healthy Youth Partnership.
I'd be happy to second the motion.
Great. All right. We've got a motion and a second, so we'll go ahead and take a vote. Marie?
Aye.
And Wesley?
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye.
Rachel?
Aye.
And Shelley? Aye. All right, wonderful. We will release that, carry on all the great work. Thank you so much for coming, and we'll look forward to seeing those booklets in Whitehill.
Thank
Thank you so much.
Fantastic.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Take care.
Good
Good
to
night.
see you all.
All right, where are we? We are on to item number E3, which is an update discussion on the charter appeal process for the Ross Valley Charter School. And this is just a discussion information update. Marcy?
Thank you. So since last week's update, we do now know the date and the time for the State Board of Education public hearing and decision related to the appeal of the Ross Valley Charter for a renewal for another 5 years. And that is going to be this Wednesday, the 17th, this next Wednesday, the 17th of March at 11 a.m. It'll be held via Zoom. And there is another item on the agenda ahead. So they anticipate no earlier than 11 a.m. And we have been able to submit our appeals documents, information for that meeting. And what we've done here for you all is to be able to put some information so that you're aware related to the State Board of Education agenda, the time for public comments, how to get those submitted, the Zoom link for the hearing meeting, and then the meeting notice so that you all can see exactly what's the State Board of Education is deciding, what they put on their agenda. And then the remainder of the items, the documents are our response, the district's response to the RVC renewal petition appeal. That's before the State Board of Education next week. And so this is just to keep you updated on that process. And there will be some of us again from Ross Valley, just like we did with the ACCS meeting. We will be at that meeting as well, presenting the district's information. So any questions or anything more to add?
Just the one observation that it looks like from the agenda that if the charter is renewed, that the entity that will be doing the oversight would be the Marin County Office of Education. Did I read that correctly?
That that decision, the final decision, will be made by the State Board of Education at their hearing. The CDE, the California Department of Education Charter Schools Division, has made that recommendation to the State Board of Education, and it's the State Board of Education who will be making the final decision. This is one of the elements of the new AB 1505 charter law. This is the very first time that this is happening in the state of California, this whole process. So there's a lot of elements to this law that are essentially untested. We are the first, precedent-setting case. So that is one of those major changes in the law that will unfold for the State Board of Education to decide. But yes, that is the recommendation. That is currently the recommendation that is being made by the CDE to the SBE.
And do we know whether the Marin County Office of Education will be sending a representative to the meeting, or are they just going to wait to hear what the SBE decides later this month?
We don't know. That's a good question. As I said, this is a new process, so we don't know how that's going to happen.
Okay. Yep. Well, I don't mean to ask questions that you don't know the answers to, but those are the few things that were crossing my mind. But thank you very much for the update.
The question from me.
Oh, sure, Marie.
No, all good.
Oh, no question. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Then we'll keep moving right along here. Let's move on to item number 4, which is recommended approval of our second interim budget report.
Right, and we have our CBO, Chris Carson, here tonight to do the presentation. And Chris, thank you so much. And you will be able to start sharing your screen whenever you're ready.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to speak on our second interim budget report this evening. Let me make sure I can share the right document. Are you able to see the budget presentation?
Yes, all good.
Okay, good. Let's put it under slide. There we go. Okay, so thank you for the opportunity to speak on our second interim budget report this evening. And so what I first wanted to do is kind of give you an overview of what the budget process looks like. In the state of California for public education, we actually have 4 budget reports that we provide. And the first one that starts the budget cycle is our June 30th budget, which is our adopted budget, but it also includes our estimated actual. So what we're providing to the governing board is actually 2 different budgets. It's the end of the current fiscal year and the adopted budget for the coming fiscal year. Then in September, mid-September, we have what's called our unaudited actuals, and that provides basically the closing of the books from the previous year, as well as the budget for the current year.
Chris, sorry to interrupt you, but just to let you know, we're still on the first slide, and I believe you've moved on to the second. So I'm not sure if, can you see that? Maybe go into presentation mode.
Yeah, it was in presentation mode.
Oh, it was, okay.
Yeah. Can you see the second slide at the moment?
Yes, now it is. I think if you just advance it as you move from slide to slide, that would be fine. Yeah.
Do you see me advancing to the third slide at the moment?
From
No.
our side, it's not in presentation mode, though.
Yeah.
It's in regular mode.
It's a regular mode because we can see your slides on the left, Chris.
Okay, it might be down below here. So what we have is the September unaudited actuals. Then in December, mid-December, we have what's called our first interim budget, which is just any updates since our September budget. And by March 15th, we have our second interim budget. And that is what we're presenting this evening, which is any changes from our first interim budget in December. Did it advance?
Nope.
No.
No.
Shoot.
I could open it up on the board docs and share my screen.
Mercy.
Then you'll tell me when to move forward.
Yes, please. I'm sorry.
All right, no worries at all.
I tried to do it 2 different ways. It didn't work.
All righty, now let me see. I have to move it for a second to get to share my screen. I want to continue, and I'm going to go.
While Marcy's doing that, the next slide is the third slide.
I'm sorry, can I just be sure that everybody can see the slide presentation? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we
are good.
Great.
Hey, thank you.
So,
All right, ready to rock and roll, Chris.
slide number 3 is our next slide, and that is related to our budget status. And you always want to take a look at the budget certification page. And what that will tell you is, looking at our multi-year projections, we have to provide at our first interim, second interim, and our adopted budget 3 years worth of financial budgets, which is the current year plus 2 additional fiscal years. And the budget certification will tell you, can we meet our financial obligations in those 3 years? Is it possible we won't, or will we not be able to? And when looking at that, your positive certification is you will meet your financial obligations. Qualified means you may not, and negative means you will not meet those financial obligations. And I want to point out that the Ross Valley School District second interim budget reflects a positive certification. So that means that we will meet our budget obligations in the current year and 2 subsequent years. Okay, Marcy. Looking at our budget, what I wanted to discuss is the next part is having to do with our revenues. When looking at our revenues, what drives your revenues beyond what the state says that they will give you in terms of cost of living adjustments is your enrollment and the subsequent impacts upon your attendance. So enrollment is how many children do we have enrolled in the schools, and your attendance is how many kids show up on a daily basis. So looking at our second interim budget report, we're reflecting no revisions in the current fiscal year of our enrollment. We're still matching at 1764. I do want to point out that at budget adoption, we had 1970. So we did see a pretty significant drop in our enrollment from our adopted budget in June to our first and second interim budgets. The other thing I want to point out is that we did subsequently drop our enrollment estimates for 22-23 and 23-24 in the second interim budget report. We've taken a look, and those numbers, the enrollment hasn't really fluctuated a great deal since the children came back. And so we did go ahead and update those numbers. Okay. And so this particular slide shows you what that progression would look like in each of our fiscal years. It also includes an additional year out, 23-24. But you can see the purple bar for each of those fiscal years is how we adopted our budget. And the orange was our first interim, and the gray is our second interim budget. So you can see we've actually dropped our budgets. Okay. The next part of your revenues, driver of your revenues beyond your enrollment and attendance, is the cost of living adjustment. And at budget adoption, we had an estimated, we were anticipating receiving a negative COLA of 7.92%. The state did make revisions when they finalized their June budget prior to us adopting, and we did have a 0 COLA for first interim and second interim for the current year. And we still have that even now. For the out years though, for 21-22, we were anticipating a 0 COLA next year. And the governor's budget proposal is now to give us a funded COLA of 3.84%. And what I want to point out is that the Department of Finance and the Marin County Office of Education Common Message, which comes through the state, BASC, the group of county offices of ed, they get together and they provide a common message that goes out to all of the school districts in the state. And that's known as the common message. And then school services. Everybody is showing a funded COLA of 3.84% next year. So that's great news for us within our revenues for next year. But what I want to point out is that in 22-23, there is the common message and the Department of Finance are both showing 2.98%, and what we have in our multi-year projections is 2.98. Excuse me. But School Services of California said that there's some risk there with that. And what they're hearing is that the Department of Finance may not be able to fund fully that 2.98% COLA. So their suggestion is 0%. And it's a little difficult to have 2.98% as what the County Office of Education is telling us to use, and 0. So within what we've provided to the governing board, the Board of Trustees, we have shown what a 0% COLA would look like in terms of our revenues and what the 2.98% is. Okay. And so what I wanted to point out is this is our multi-year projections in terms of revenues, because if I have a different COLA, cost of living adjustment, it will not impact my expenses in any way, but it will impact my revenues. And what you see is the progressions in our revenues based upon those cost of living adjustments and enrollment numbers. And within the second 21-22 fiscal year, you see the gray bar, you see a large increase. That has to do with the 3.84%. But then subsequent to that, if you look to the 22-23, you see the yellow bar. That yellow bar would be what our revenues look like should we remove the cost of living adjustment from our multi-year projections, and that equates out to $440,000 roughly. And so that does have a negative impact upon our multi-year projection revenues as well as our ending fund balances, our ending fund balance would then be less by $440,000 as well. Okay. In terms of our revenues within the current fiscal year, the local control funding formula is 62% of our total revenues. That's why I focus most of the attention right there, because that's the single largest source of revenues in the district. We do have roughly 5% in federal revenues, 6% in state. We do have 3% in terms of yes. And we also have a large portion in terms of the parcel tax, which is what the voters have approved. That's 16%. And then some other various funding sources. So we have total general fund revenues of $26.5 million. Okay. On the flip side is our expenses, and our expenses, the single largest source of expenses is salaries and benefits. School districts are in the business to provide education to children, which means that we are a people business. And so it's not unexpected to see salaries and benefits the single largest source of expenditures, but it is 79%. And then you start looking at services and other costs, 14%, books and supplies, 4%, and other outgo 3%. So total expense in the current fiscal year, general fund, $26.4 million. So when looking at our first interim and our second interim budgets, this particular table gives you a good idea of what our adjustments were between the two budget periods. And you see that there are federal revenues of $300,000 with an increase. You see state income and local income $26,000. So a total budget increase of $328,871 in total revenues. And in expenses, you see salaries and benefits with increases 113, 17,000 in books, roughly 140 in services. So a total increase in expenses of $270,000. So what we've been focusing on right now in terms of our budgets have been the revenues and our expenses for the current year. But we also have to look at what are our assumptions for the multi-year projections. And so when looking at it on the revenue side, you have COLA only for your LCFF. We also have decreasing enrollment, which unfortunately I didn't put in there, but we do have decreasing enrollment /ADA. Federal revenues are flat, other state flat, but we have pulled out our one-time funding sources such as learning loss mitigation funds. And then local, we do have a 3% increase built into our parcel tax with our new parcel tax. And on the salary side, we have step and column increases, and we do show attrition due to declining enrollment built in. And the other major thing that is happening on the expense side is that we are experiencing large increases in our PERS and STIRS. Now, the state has kept flat our PERS and STIRS here for the most part in the coming budget year, but after that, they start to revert back to those increases that we have been accustomed to over the last few years. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well in future slides, but that's also shows some in future years increases. And on the supply side, we have supplies and services. We've removed all of our one-time expenses as well. Okay. So going back to the PERS and STIRS, the reason I point out that we have seen increases in our PERS and STIRS, if you go back to the 13-14 year, what you see is roughly combined PERS and STIRS of $1 million, $1.1 million. If you fast forward that to the 22-23 year, we're looking at almost $3 million. It's $2.9 million. And so you see a large increase in our PERS and STIRS costs. And one of the drivers of that is increases in salaries, but the single largest increase that is being felt is having to do with percent increases. And so the amount that the district is charged for salaries, for pension costs, have been increasing exponentially, which is actually what's causing this very large increase. And I want to point out that the reason you see the drop in STIRS is a combination of declining enrollment. So also cuts in certificated salaries as a result, but also because of the budget agreement that the governor has. But then you also see the spike in it in the 22-23 fiscal year. In terms of the multi-year projections, I do want to point out that what you really need to look at is what your ending balances are and what your net gain and loss are, and which is the net gain and loss is shown by the net increase decrease row. And so when looking at it, we are showing a positive gain in the 2021 year of $108,000. 21-22, it goes up to $587,000. A lot of that has to do with the one-time, the state is continuing to fund us at our 2019-20 attendance as a result of declining enrollment in COVID. And so what you see is in the 22-23 year, a large drop in our attendance, and as a result, you end up with a large decline and a deficit of $1.5 million. Now, as you move that forward in terms of your ending balances, we still have in excess of the state minimum required, which is 3%, plus the board's also additional requirement of 7%, so a total of 10% that the district needs to set aside. And so looking at our 22-23 fiscal year, we have a 14%. And so we are in excess of that. But keep in mind that that 22-23 fiscal year as shown is with a 2.98% COLA. If I decrease my revenues by $440,000, that increases that deficit to 1.9 million and decreases your total reserves as well. But even with that, we are still above the 10%. I want to point that out, but it becomes more problematic as we move forward to the following fiscal budget adoption in June, because at that point we have the 2021 fiscal year is no longer one of the 3 years we're looking at in terms of our 3-year multi-year projections. You would add the 23-24 fiscal year. And so we would have a large deficit in that fiscal year as well as a result of the declining enrollment. So I want to point that out as we move forward. Okay. And so when looking at what those components of your ending fund balances are, not only do you have your total ending fund balance, but you have components thereof. And so things such as we have listed here, are revolving cash. Those are dollars that are set aside here should we have an emergency check we need to issue that wouldn't go through the county office. It would give us the ability to write that right away. We have restricted funds, which are the categorical sides. We have to set those aside for, for the intended purpose. Then we have the 3% state reserve requirement. And again, that's the statutory requirement for the Ross Valley School District from the state. And then the board additional 7% reserve. And so the excess amount is what's left over after we set aside all of those other amounts of our existing ending balances. So at the end of 22-23, we actually have an excess reserve above the 10% of $871,000. And with that, I know that was a lot of information and it kind of goes fast. I love talking about budget, and so I can easily jump from one thing to another, and I understand it very deeply, but I don't know if there are any questions that you all have.
Marie here, who also enjoy talking about budget very much. So there was one question that actually came up during your presentation as I was trying to tie it with something else I heard earlier today. Can you tell us a little bit about AB 86 and how much is it, are you counting for that? Is there going to be extra money for the district with the Assembly Bill 86, or is it already part of your budget? Tell us more about that.
Assembly Bill 86, I believe that's the new dollars that the state is coming forward with. There's two different pots. There is approximately 1.5 billion from the governor, and 2.5, and then approximately 4.5 and another dollar amount. Those are not part of it yet. And the reason they are not part of it is that they're not final. And so we would go and make those adjustments as soon as we find out for certain that they are included. And I also want to point out that those are one-time revenues. And so what you would see is a grossing up of the revenues and also grossing up of expenses. So they end up wiping each other out. So it becomes a zero amount in terms of our ending fund balances. But both of those dollar amounts, and I've seen some estimates, and it would be roughly $1.7 million between the two of them for the district, if those numbers are accurate. But they are designed for different sources. For example, one of the pots is designed for, similar to the learning loss mitigation funds, to be able to provide things such as additional staff for cleaning, and if you need any additional staff to ensure that children are brought back sooner. And then the other, which is the larger pot of money, is designed to be able to provide additional services for children.
But that's maybe something definitely we could talk about that, it's probably in the next, in the next cycle, right? In the next 3 months, you should know by then
Absolutely.
if and what money you have and how that's allocated, right? Okay,
Absolutely.
I look forward to hear about that in the next 3 months.
Yes, and actually one of the requirements is that those dollars are then cycled through the LCAP process. They would be reflected in there. And so there is that whole idea of providing information out to the public as part of that process.
Great.
Thank you.
I had one question on slide 14, when you were talking about the reserves and the different components within the reserves. I didn't see anything in there about the bond and repayment of the bond and whether any of those reserves have to be dedicated. And I know that sometimes there have been community members that I've had questions from that say, oh, we have to repay the bond, but it's not in there. Could you just talk a little bit about that to help?
Yes, actually, that's correct. It's not in there. And the reason is that the general fund, which is what the topic of the discussion was this evening, shows the expenses and the debt of the secured debt by the general fund. And what I mean by that is the bond is actually secured by the property taxes based upon the Prop 39 GO bond elections that the district has had. And so those actually are not secured by the general fund directly. And so they are secured by those property taxes and by the property within the San Anselmo and Fairfax communities.
Got it. Okay, so it's not like a liability on our balance sheet or anything like that. It goes directly through the property.
We actually have a different bond fund for it, but those are reflected twice a year. We provide the detail on that.
Okay.
And so the next time that we provide an overall budget will be the June 30th budget for adoption. And that actually will reflect that the GO bond fund, which is the Fund 21.
Great. Thank you.
So that will show our debt as well as those dollars that, so the way it works is the county of Marin levies those taxes, and they receive the property taxes related specifically to the general obligation bond. They then hold those and they pay directly from those sources the bond debt. And so
It's not on your books ever.
Right.
It's on the county books, but they are for
it
for
is
us.
in our books, but in a different fund altogether.
Yeah.
Just not in the general fund.
It's on a general fund. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification, because that's helpful to know. Thank you.
Chris, it's Wesley. Have you heard, through the grapevine, whether there are any other districts within Marin that are struggling in a way that we're not, in that they're not getting a positive certification?
Not that they're not getting positive certifications, but within the county of Marin, there are 3 districts that I'm aware of that are not what's called basic aid districts.
Yeah.
Basic aid districts means that based upon their attendance, their property taxes exceed what their local control funding formula say their revenues should be. So they're actually given their full property tax base as opposed to the LCFF. And so they are actually funded at a higher amount per student than a district like Ross Valley, San Rafael Elementary School District, and Novato Unified. We're all what's called state aid districts, where our property taxes are smaller than what we would receive through the local control funding formula. And as a result, we get additional state aid for those dollars. And so the districts that are state aid districts in the county, they're struggling with the enrollment, because the enrollment and attendance then impacts your total revenues. And with the state pandemic, it's the county as a whole saw some large decreases in enrollment and attendance. And I'm also seeing some decreases around the state as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's Chris, that was a very helpful explanation, because it really, this particular phenomenon is really shining a spotlight on the difference between those 2 funding formulas. Because when your funding is based on enrollment and something like a pandemic hits that impacts your enrollment, that then impacts your revenue. Whereas the districts that are not enrollment-based funding, because they get all of the property taxes, have no revenue impact on something like a pandemic, because they just continue to get all of their property taxes. So that was a helpful explanation. Thank you.
Well done, Chris. This is Ryan. Nice and clear. It's nice to know that our CBO likes to talk budgets. I can hear that.
Improved.
Nice.
Gotta like that.
Any other?
This does require a vote this evening.
Yep.
If you've all finished the discussion portion to approve the interim budget.
Great. Hey, Rachel, do you have any questions? Want to make sure that we have everything asked, or?
No, I work at a CPA firm, so this was all really clear to me.
All right.
Thank you, Chris.
That's great. All
I'll
right.
make a
Well
motion
then.
to approve the interim budget, Ryan.
I'll second it, Rachel.
Great. All right. Let's go with the vote. Ryan?
Aye.
Rachel?
Aye.
Marie?
Aye.
Wesley?
Aye.
And Shelley? Aye. All right.
And then we will, as we talked about at the last board meeting, we do have our budget workshop coming up. And so being able to go even deeper and into budget and all of our funding sources, as well as our expenditures. And so we're looking forward to that on Thursday, April 22nd at 6 p.m. And a save the date will go out this week, so that all of our community, because that will be open to the community as well. So we're looking forward to that. And thank you so much, Chris, for the clear explanation.
Thank you very much, Chris. Really appreciate it. And thanks, Marcy. I for getting that information out community-wide, that budget workshop is not just for us, but it's for the entire community to be involved. And so hopefully anyone who has questions or is interested in how all of our schools are funded and how we manage that will attend that meeting and get their questions answered. All right. So if you want to go ahead and bring up, there you go. We're now on item E5, which is recommended approval of resolution 15-20-21 to decrease the number of certificated positions due to reduction or elimination of a particular kind of service.
All right, thank you. And before Esther gets started with this particular item tonight, I do just want to say this is always one of the most not fun portions of any element of the work that we do, is when we are looking at potential reductions of positions. But on that note, we do have some good news per se, and I'll let Esther take it from here. So Esther, go ahead with explaining what this resolution before you tonight is all about.
Sure. Thank you so much, Marcy. So as Marcy mentioned, we are looking tonight at Resolution 15-2021, and it is to decrease the number of certificated employees due to a reduction or elimination of identified types of services. And this is looking at next year, not this year, but next school year. You know, we don't really know what things are going to look like for the 21-22 school year, but because of statutory layoff deadlines, these initial and preliminary notices must be provided to employees affected by such actions by March 15th, and that is our deadline that we're working under. So we've listed in the resolution itself, you'll see the particular kinds of service. And the first type of service listed is the position of intervention specialist. This position is paid for by categorical funds, specifically Title I funds. And because we do not yet know the amount of Title I funds we will be receiving for the following school year, we are recommending the elimination of 0.6 FTE. Now, the next three types of services, these are not based on categorical funds, but rather enrollment projections. And so as we heard earlier this evening, our enrollment projections are very much in flux at this time. And so the elementary enrollment and is a little challenging to determine what exactly it's going to be. So really, these are coming before you out of an abundance of caution. So the first one is the TK through 5th grade self-contained elementary classes, and the recommendation is 4.0 FTE, elementary art at 0.64 FTE, and elementary music at 0.649 FTE. And as Marcy mentioned, while this is not anything we look forward to doing, and we never wish we had to even do this. But given this scenario, there is a glimmer of good news in that we do not have to provide preliminary layoff notices for the total amount, which is the 5.889, but rather we are only having to give notice to our 2 least senior music teachers who will receive a preliminary notice. And again, this is out of an abundance of caution for all of the planning that needs to take place between now and when school begins next year. Our next statutory deadline is May 14th, and that is by law, we must provide a final layoff notices to our employees. But historically, especially recently in Ross Valley, we've been able to really minimize that final layoff notice number to only a very few folks. And usually this occurs through staffing reductions that are absorbed through, for example, approved uncompensated leaves of absence or attrition from retirements and resignations or reassignments. But should we need to move forward, we would be bringing to our next board meeting to the May 9th board meeting, we would bring to you a subsequent resolution that would should we need to move forward and give final notices, that would come to you at that time. Are there any questions?
And even with any final layoff notices that might be given, there's still a lot can occur over the summer. And so
Absolutely.
there's a possibility that we would have some reinstatements. We actually had that happen for this school year, in which we had 3 of our self-contained elementary classes. We gave 3 final layoff notices, and we were able to ask all 3 back. And so one of the reasons that we try to be as careful as positive and not to go deep is that we don't want to take a chance on losing any of our employees. And so we do try to be very conservative, but at the same time, not overly conservative to where we might give a notice and then our valued employees go out and find jobs elsewhere. Another part of what we do in Ross Valley is none of our employees, so as Esther mentioned, there are 2 least senior music teachers who will receive an initial layoff. They have already been communicated with so that they are prepared and they know and understand everything surrounded around the layoff notices. Now, looking at art and music specifically, is the reason the FTE looks a little bit deeper than it might otherwise need to is for a number of years in art, for example, we've had one of our art teachers has been able to take a partial leave of absence. And so as we look at enrollment for next year and we calculate what the FTE needed next year will be for elementary art, for example, what we need to factor in and going a tiny bit deeper is in the event that that employee does not request take an uncompensated leave of absence for next year. And so we've had to go a little bit deeper there. And then in music, we did have one of our music teachers was classified as by accident in probationary status and not in temporary. So having to go a little bit deeper in there because we can't have 2 teachers owning the same amount of FTE. But in looking at the final layoff, there may not be any reduction for that employee whatsoever when it's all said and done from the amount of contracted time that the person had this school year. So it's very complicated, layoffs and our staffing and all of that. And so what we do is we do an explanation to each of the employees who are impacted. We let our union know in advance so that they're fully aware should they get any questions by unit members. And so hopefully this is clear and we can answer any further questions if you have them.
I don't have any question. I have a comment here that we keep hearing the pain to find good teachers and hiring the right people. And I myself have been part of finding some of the right teachers last year in, for the music program. And as part of the Yes Foundation, we're really looking forward to hiring more, some new teachers there. And so I'm in general worried about the risk of losing some of those, even young teachers, doesn't matter how young they are. It is hard to find good teachers. So this is a worry I have about that.
Yeah.
Understood.
Absolutely. One of the reasons that, we're monitoring enrollment for next year and we will be reaching out, as I mentioned, under another item on the agenda tonight, our schools reopening planning is reaching out to families who have left us this school year in particular. What we know in the big picture of California is that California is anticipated to go through one of the biggest losses of residents that it will have ever seen. And that's supposed to last through 2027. So what we have compounding is Ross Valley goes through these natural ebbs and flows cycles of increased enrollment, decreased, and we go through, relatively speaking, if you look historically over Ross Valley, it about comes in every 12 to 15 years as these cycles of enrollment. But what we've not had before is where California is also declining in enrollment too. So we have that exacerbation as well as the pandemic that has definitely hit. And Ross Valley is not the only school district in Marin County who has had a loss of students. But as Chris talked about in his previous agenda items. So a lot of correlations and connections tonight in our board agenda is that if you're a basic aid district and you lose students, you don't lose or feel it in a loss of funding. You maintain or retain that funding. The good news is with California, at least for Ross Valley, or sorry, Marin County and for California, is that the state is saying that they will fund us on the 2019-20 attendance, which is good because we won't feel that reduction of enrollment if it were to does continue on into next school year. We won't be feeling it into next school year. So we do have a little bit of a cushion of a school year in terms of our funding. But we also need to be careful that we're not overstaffed at the same time. So we do try to be very careful and cautious and not go too deep, but are able to have a plan should we have any staff who we didn't lay off. For example, we need to be able to absorb, and that's one of the things that we looked at when we were looking at reductions is with next school year being back into full school, we do know that there are concerns that we're reading about as we're monitoring data and the research is any potential learning loss. And so we are looking to have support for our students academically next school year. So we already have a plan in the event that we might be overstaffed to serve our students, to help them next school year as we're returning into phase 5 or our full return. But sticking with this topic tonight is before you is the layoff resolution as we are planning for next school year. And we do need to begin planning early as these statutory timelines that Esther mentioned.
Any other questions by trustees on this? So we'll be approving this for the this, and then it will come back again in May, correct, for the final?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And you could see a different amount of FTE on here. It won't be increased because we wouldn't have done that notification at the initial, but it could be less FTE.
That's right.
Any other questions before, or if not, we can go ahead and entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 15-20-21.
Second, Ryan.
All right, we'll go ahead with the vote then. Wesley.
Aye.
And Ryan.
Aye.
Marie.
Aye.
Rachel.
Aye.
And Shelley. Aye. All right, well, we'll keep our fingers crossed as we hear what happens in May and all the effort that we do in terms of the enrollment between now and then. I know enrollment is open, and the efforts that we're making in terms of bringing some of those families back into our school district who may have left during the pandemic, or folks who may be moving around. So we'll keep going on that.
That's right. Thank you.
So looking at the time, I'm wondering if I know that we've got consent actions, a little bit of board business, and then we do need to go back into closed session. So I think I'm going to go ahead with a motion to let us extend. I know we have to make a motion to extend our time beyond, hold on, I need to get to it here. A motion to continue the meeting beyond 10:30 should we need it. That would be in our extended closed session, just to make sure that we don't forget about doing that as we move on into our other sessions. So I'm gonna make a motion that we approve continuing past 10:30.
Marie, I second.
Okay, so we'll go ahead. So I, Shelley, Marie.
Aye.
Rachel.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
All right, and Wesley.
Aye.
Okay, so that covers us should we need to go beyond 10:30. Now we can move into our consent actions. Is there anyone who has anything that we need to discuss, any clarifications on any of those consents? They're all are kind of the standard thing that you see in consent, but before we do a motion.
And I'm sorry, I've lost connection to the server, so I wasn't able to advance the agenda. So I stop sharing and I'll get that started back up again and get it up there.
Okay, so we've got, there were 6 items on the consent action. Anybody have any questions on that? Otherwise, we can entertain a motion to move those along.
I'll go ahead and move consent.
Second, Ryan.
All right, so we have a motion and a second, and we'll go ahead with a vote on that. Wesley?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
Rachel?
Aye.
Marie?
Aye.
And Shelley? Aye. Okay. Maybe we won't need that 10:30 after all.
Chop, chop.
Moving along, we are on to item G, board business. We've got committee updates and reports from trustees. Now that we all have had our committee assignments, does anybody have any committee updates? I know we had the YES update already, so Rachel, I know you're in that one.
Yeah, I actually have 2 updates.
Okay.
So I went to DLAC last week, and that was hosted by Eric, and that was, it was a really great experience for a first committee meeting. It was a very warm, welcoming group. It was good for me to learn about what they do and like how they all interact. There's a lot of representation from White Hill Middle School. We had the vice principal, we had a social worker, we had counseling services. They talked about a warm line option that people can use that's available. They gave everybody like information on how to use that. It's not like a hotline, which is like an urgent situation, but it is for, talking to somebody and having someone on the other end who can listen and can maybe refer you to other services that, might be necessary. I just talked about a little bit about how students are evaluated for the English language learner program, and then how they're like moved through the process to become fully fluent in English and be classified as that. And so that was a great thing to learn about for me. And then, there are family members there from our school community. And so they were able to speak up and offer, their input. And I thought that was really valuable just to hear what they had to say. And it was just great to see that their input is being pulled in and being used at the district and being considered. So it was just a really friendly, warm meeting. I was really pleased to see what they were doing there. I'm looking forward to our next meeting, and I would really like to invite other families to show up, especially, if you have an English language learner at home. I think that it's really just a great community there that they're building, and kind of it's like a community within our larger community. And I think it's like a really good way to foster connections between the staff and the district and the families and the students. So I thought that was a great meeting. And then the YES board meeting, we kind of heard pretty much everything from Chelsea. It was nice to hear from the different teachers. So we heard from the art teacher about their YES art night and just how, surprisingly well attended it was, even though it was still virtual. It's not the same like having you're in the classroom, but they did have like about 30 families per night. And, there was multiple people in those Zoom classes. So it was kind of nice to hear about that. And they're still managing connections, even though it's remote. And they're, they are like everyone else, they're planning to go back and they're kind of figuring out the schedules for all of that, for music and for art, and poetry is going on right now. And so it was kind of interesting to hear what Matt, the teacher for that, had to say about what the students are learning right now. And how it's been an interesting medium having them on like a screen for poetry, because it's kind of given some people a little bit more flexibility to express themselves. And sometimes it wouldn't be the kids who would normally speak up in class. So it was fun to hear that too. So it was a nice window into what YES is doing, because I know that they're still really busy, but it's harder to see when kids aren't coming home with like armfuls of paperwork. So those are my 2 updates.
And Marcy, you can stop sharing your screen since this is kind of a discussion here. So
thank you.
All right. Anyone else want to update on board updates on committees? Trustees?
It's Wesley. I don't, excuse me, I'm sorry. I don't have any update.
All right. Marie, do you have anything from?
No, I have a JLAC meeting tomorrow morning. So, and I think Ryan, you have a meeting tomorrow morning as well. So a couple of meetings happening tomorrow, but update will be in the next few weeks.
Great.
Mhm.
And Ryan, anything?
Nope.
All righty. And then I attended with Marcy, the Superintendent's Council, and really appreciated getting to be part of that. And that includes, as Marcy had mentioned, you did the update last time, but just being part of the conversation with the site council members and the PTAs and various teachers and principals and staff. So that was really, I appreciated hearing all of their opinions and a lot of the concern, kind of a general community concern for wanting to be helpful for all of the families who maybe are having more difficult than others in COVID, and really wanting to find ways to reach out to each other and be supportive as a whole community, and the parents working with the teachers to really understand who needs support and how that can be offered. So it was nice. I appreciated, Marcy, you did a great job of having us in some small group conversations. So that was great as well, to be able to have those small group conversations.
Thank you.
Marcy, do you have any updates? Oh, is this when we do? Oh, you don't have any cabinet updates, or you do?
We need to approve the
Well, we
meeting
now
minutes.
need to do the meeting minutes, and then
Okay.
that the cabinet superintendent cabinet
He's next. Okay, so now that that's great. So now we're gonna do approval of the meeting minutes. Was there anyone, do we have any edits to them? Do they all look okay?
No edits this time. It was
No.
beautifully done.
The lady there.
Appreciate all of the eyes on everything. Okay. If there are no edits, we will entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the board minutes for March 2nd's meeting.
March 2nd. All right.
And I second, Marie.
Great. So let's go with the vote. Rachel?
Aye.
Anne Marie?
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye.
Wesley?
Aye.
And Shelley? Aye. Great. So those minutes are approved. Now we can move on to superintendent and cabinet reports. Go, Marcy, go.
Okay, thank you. And Chris, do you have anything to add this evening?
I have nothing this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And Julia, anything to add this evening?
Just that, along with everything else, we're preparing for CASP testing. So at this point, it is looking like the state's going to move forward with testing. It's a shortened version. And so Sean, our director of technology, and I are working on putting a schedule together and just trying to find a way to make it go as smoothly and easily as possible for all, and actually look forward to getting the data. The data is going to be less used, as an indicator for the state, and more information for us about how our kids are doing and how we can best support them, particularly when we return in the fall. And then kind of related to that, but also with the return in April, will come a return of Chromebooks, which is going to be an interesting process as well. So we're getting ready to determine how, for families that are coming back full-time, where the kids are coming back full-time, we'll probably be pulling those computers back in as well. And we've got, I think, almost 500 computers out there right now. So that's another little puzzle to solve.
Thank you, Julia. And Dr. Salinas, anything else to add from the land of HR?
No, we're continuing to work with all of our humans, so nothing more to add. Thank you.
Thank you. And Eric Sable, anything from Student Services?
Nothing additional tonight from Student Services. Thank you.
All righty, and nothing additional from me as well from Superintendent's Department. And so I think that's what you get, is short superintendent cabinet updates when you have back-to-back school board meetings.
Back-to-back, action-packed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think we heard from almost all of our cabinet tonight on other various topics, so that's also not super surprising. Thank you all for all of your updates and working to help keep everything rolling along with all of the puzzle pieces that are moving around and keeping us informed as well. Really appreciate all that work.
You bet.
All right, so in terms of the future board topics and board direction, the one thing that I heard from this evening And I would echo, Marie, that you had mentioned, which isn't part of our budget, but was the one-time funds that will be coming to the district for COVID and for helping students recover from the impacts of COVID-19. And so maybe that would be helpful to have on the April, if on the April meeting, to have that
I
discussion.
think it might be, yeah, Chris might just want to have that a bit later, depending on when does,
Yeah.
it might not have to be April. I'm interested to hear about it when it's ready. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. So as soon as we know, yes, exactly. So when we'll leave it up to the staff to know when it's appropriate for us to have that conversation, but when it is, that would be great to have that come back to us. And I'm imagining that that's around kind of the impact on learning through the end of this year. I know the county's having conversations around the summer and what's happening, what kind of supports are available to students over the summer. And then the idea, Julia, I think you had mentioned at one point, the idea of accelerated learning for next year. And so we can have that conversation at some point. Not right now, because we're still working on the puzzle pieces for the end of this year. But
yeah.
Are there any other future board topics that folks are thinking? Marcy, could you does Yes do a regular update, or is this just an as needed update from the Yes?
They're more than welcome. I'm happy to come as frequently as we want them. So we can have Chelsea come, or any other member of Yes come for the remaining board meetings of the year. And that might be a good idea, given especially where they're into, as Chelsea talked about tonight, raising that remaining 300 some odd thousand that they've committed to for this year. We can ask her to come back again.
Well, I'll let you, whenever it seems appropriate and whenever we can be helpful with that conversation, just let us know. We can put that on the board planning agenda for those kinds of things. And I think it's also just helpful, like we heard from the Healthy Youth Collaborative. And so it's nice to kind of have a range of people come and talk to us and make presentations. So whatever seems to be timely, we can go ahead and put those on the agenda going forward.
All righty.
Any other thoughts before we adjourn into continuation of our closed session? Hearing none, then it is 9:43 and we will close out our regular meeting and adjourn back into the continuation of our closed session. And
let me just explain just some logistics. As with the top of the meeting tonight, when we're in closed session, we won't be live streaming the meeting at that point because we'll be in closed session. All we have left to do when we come back out of closed session is, of course, a report out. Should there have been any action taken, report out whether there is or isn't, and then to adjourn the meeting on whole. So we'll pause the recording for the audio portion. And then when we come out of the closed session, we'll resume recording so that there will be a continuous audio recording of tonight's meeting that will be posted to our district website under the board meeting section.
Great.
And so when you're ready, then what we'll do is we'll let Sean know that he can stop live streaming. And then Sean, if you could please let us know when you've done it.
I already did it. Sorry, I saw you start to move Shelley onto what looked like a closed session item, and I just decided to take us offline. So we're off.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Then I will pause the recording now as we adjourn into our continuation of closed session.
Tell us when we're okay. We are back from closed session. It's 10:22 p.m. Nothing to report out from the closed session. So we'll move on to item K, meeting debrief. If there's any closing comments from any board members or anything else, Marcy, any comments about our meeting? I know this was a little bit of a longer meeting than we normally have. And we're gonna got a little bit of a break before April comes up.
Yes, thank you. I think for the long of a meeting that we did have tonight, we got a lot in.
Yeah.
And I think each of the presentations was probably as concise and succinct as they could have been.
Yeah, no, there was a lot to do.
Yeah.
We had a lot
But
to do.
nice to have their visitors from Marin Healthy Youth Partnerships. So that was great to have them here as well, and to know where the money that the district set aside a number of years ago is going to be used, which will be back for younger students that we have in our school district age.
That's great. Okay, anything else? Otherwise, we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 10:23 p.m. Thank you all so much for your time and dedication and volunteerism. Appreciate it. Thanks.